Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Veriff Voices, the podcast where we talk about fraud, compliance, tech, and all things related to identity verification. The topic under discussion today is compliance, actually, and joining me to do so is Jeremy Joly, who is CPO of a company called spektr, one of Veriff's partners. Jeremy, first of all, welcome, and thank you for joining us. Do you just want to tell us a little bit more about yourself, about your experience, and maybe about your role at spektr as well?
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Really happy to be here, and thanks for the opportunity to be on this podcast. I'm Jeremy, Chief Product Officer at spektr, and spektr is actually our second venture. I'm part of a co-founder team that built one before, where we also partner with Veriff, and that's why we had a good experience, obviously, to reiterate it. So what we did back then was to build like a no-code platform for onboarding. So it would let our customers, namely financial institutions, to build very specific, bespoke onboarding processes the way they want to shape it. And Veriff was basically a service that would be added onto that orchestration of onboarding process in order to add on what Veriff is very good at, namely doing the compliance and fraud checks that our clients needed to. So we're going to do the same with spektr, with a bit of more elements, covering more use cases. So we're very happy to be able to discuss together about this today.
Nice. Okay. And tell us a little bit more about spektr then. Tell us, I mean, it's obviously a kind of a developing value proposition, and you mentioned some different use cases that are in there as well. How is it that you're kind of transforming that compliance onboarding space, do you think?
Yeah, so spektr is based on the vision and the realization that the market today is pretty fragmented in terms of compliance and risk. There's a lot of players out there that are very good at doing what they're doing, but if you were looking for like more a holistic tool that can put the glue and put the cement between all these different blocks, that doesn't really exist. And then often what we realize talking to a lot of compliance people is that they have to juggle between a case management, a fraud tool, identity verification service, alerts for AML in another one. So it turns out that they have to juggle between a lot of different places. And sometimes they also lose a bit of information because the data is not really centralized. So what spektr is trying to do is trying to orchestrate all these different bits together in order to propose a place where these processes, compliance and risk processes, can be centralized and organized and put into motion all these different modules and blocks that are part of the strategy. For these customers. And when I'm talking customers, we're talking payments, brokers, banks, financial institution, essentially, or financial services.
I see. So would you sort of summarize it as being a sort of a convenience element, really? I mean, it's sort of, when you're talking about orchestration that way, it certainly sounds like you're bringing these sort of, in sometimes fairly disparate parts together into sort of one place that just makes it, I'm assuming, a much easier user experience for the person, the end user.
Yeah, exactly. We're a platform that's trying to build we call it the infrastructure, the backend infrastructure for these compliance team, risk people, to build basically the processes that they usually do either in the CRM system or even manually, on a spreadsheet. They might have a risk assessment on the spreadsheet. They might then go manually to Google to do some Google search about a specific companies that they're trying to onboard, and then they might have a contract with Veriff when they do onboarding with for individuals, for example. But when it comes to companies, it's a bit more manual. So what we're trying to do, it's a long process. We're at the beginning of it. It's putting all these modules together in order to try to automate as much as possible.
Awesome. Thank you for that. It's a really good summary. Let's talk about the kind of the big picture, if you like, first of all, before we sort of hone in on the specifics. Specifically, the kind of the I guess the market trends and challenges is the way to sort of probably summarize it. But what do you see as being the main challenges in the sort of the KYC/compliance landscape at the moment? And what are some of the things you've learned from this venture plus your previous one as well?
What's interesting for financial institutions and the clients we're servicing most are the clients that have multiple jurisdictions. So their challenge is basically understanding, okay, what is the regulation here? What is the regulation there? So having a tool that gives them the possibility to do the compliance and risk that puts them in accordance of the regulations in that jurisdiction is a bit hard to find, because there's a lot of tools that are one size fit all that is not really built for that. So the perspective we're coming into is that you can build as many onboarding processes as you want, and they might have like a tiny little tweak because you're deploying them in different jurisdictions, or you might deploy them for different types of clients, which is another angle. So companies versus individuals is one very obvious difference.
Yeah, I see that, and I think we have something similar ourselves as well. I mean, lots of companies that use us are onboarding customers from everywhere in the world. I mean, there's no limitation as to where their customers can be based, and I think it's very rare these days to find companies that do just operate in one particular country. So I think that's the digital world that we live in has kind of opened up these for the good, I think, but for businesses to operate in a truly global sense, and being able to be aware and cognizant of what those different jurisdictions are and so on, I think is something that is a problem that maybe didn't exist that long ago. So it's interesting to see. What about turning your eyes forward a little bit? What do you see as being some of the big trends that you would anticipate seeing over the next 12 months or so when it comes to the compliance space particularly? I mean, is it more of the same, do you think, or are there any new things that you're kind of preparing for?
So that question can go in a lot of different directions. So I'm thinking also like what the industry looks like. That's one part of the question, the way I understand it. And then there's also like where is the tech and where is the fraud and where are the fraudsters going to? That's another angle of the question. So maybe the interesting one is for the fraudsters.
Okay.
Where I mean I don't know. We can explore that and come back to the other one later. But I'm thinking for us is more like we don't have the how to put it. We don't have exactly the know-how on how to provide the right tools. Now let me rephrase this. I think so. What we're trying to do is aggregate all the different tools that have the know-how that are basically all fighting together to provide more robust solutions for compliance and risk. And what we're doing basically is a arm wrestling with the fraudsters and the people doing money laundering and terrorist financing. So where it's going is basically I see that this race is basically just going to accelerate with the advent of the new technologies. And so like the buzzword is AI, right? So everybody's getting better at this. There's Monaco, for example, has just been put on the gray list. So there's more and more regulation that is going after people that are building those shell companies. But in the same time, there's more and more solutions for those people to do so. There's constantly this cat and mouse race. And I just think it's just going to continue, but just probably pace up as it always do. It always does.
Yeah, absolutely. We sort of see that from our side too. Actually, I think it's one of the concepts that we've sort of thrown around over the last sort of 6 months to a year or so is this idea of a kind of a fraud prevention ecosystem, which is there's no one tool that can really stop and keep you safe from the various different types of fraud that exist out there, generated by AI or not. But what you can do is put in a number of different tools, and all of that helps to create the bigger picture. And I can only imagine that the compliance space is the same, in that maybe there's not one tool that can solve everything for you, but this is possibly what we're talking about with spektr, where we're starting to pull in these various things and kind of creating that same kind of ecosystem approach. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, totally fair to say. And that brings also the questions of like, okay, if we throwing all that technology to solve these problems, are we getting rid of the people? And I think that's also an interesting discussion and like trying to anticipate where this is going. And in my personal opinion, you would never be able to replace those people. You will just the technology will just enhance them, and take the boring task away from them, right? So they can really spend their time or like have all the right tool to discover all these elaborate schemes that people with bad intentions are putting together.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've got, as I say, a sort of similar situation at Veriff where we're using, effectively using AI to combat AI in the sense of the what the fraudsters are using. But there's very much a human layer behind that the AI, which I think is bringing that kind of creativity, I suppose, and problem solving and things that the machine learning can't do yet, and maybe will never be able to do in the same way as a human brain to do. We've got some incredibly sophisticated fraud experts working on things behind the scenes here that I don't think a machine could replicate, or at least we're some way off being in that.
Yeah, not tomorrow for sure.
Not tomorrow, exactly. Everyone's safe, very safe for now. Let's talk about that sort of link with Veriff thing. So I think that's quite an interesting sort of segue into that. What were some of the main challenges that spektr was facing that kind of drove you towards it? Obviously, you'd worked with us before with your previous venture, but what were some of the things that you'd identified as being, this is the kind of thing that Veriff can help us with?
Yeah, 100%. So as we said, like by the pure like form and shape of the customers we're servicing, Veriff is an obvious choice to help us like put a broader offering for our clients, and especially in the onboarding part, right? Because what we're looking at is customers that have multiple jurisdictions. So the global reach that Veriff has, and supporting all sort of different identity documentation, that just basically gives us a very good place to be when it comes to servicing all these complex use cases. There's a few other things, like for example the fast and scalable onboarding. We have the fact that our clients are using a solution like ours. They don't want to put the IT resources into building an onboarding process themselves, but they expect very high performance, right? So if they are a broker that is operating in multiple jurisdictions, getting 1,000 clients a month, they want that onboarding process to be flawless, right? They want it to be, because every time the onboarding process doesn't work, it's money they lose immediately, right? So when we were selecting partners or looking at who can help us doing the identity verification and fraud checks for us, with us, Veriff was an obvious candidate because of the reliability that you guys showed on that aspect.
Yeah, I've heard that from quite a few sort of customers and partners of ours actually too. Is that in some ways it's very unsexy, but it just works. You know, it's one of those things that is a line that we sort of quite like actually, because it's sort of, you don't have to, you can just kind of count on it. There's a very high level of reliability there. I just want to pick up on one thing that you mentioned around the kind of trying to make it as easy as possible for your customers, I suppose. You mentioned before about your previous venture was kind of a low code, no code platform that was presumably very easy for sort of non-technical people to implement. Is that kind of something that you're still seeing a lot of in terms of the sort of the tech capabilities within some of your customers, and they want a very easy solution, something that they can easily integrate to their own systems without necessarily having to have that tech know-how at their own end, if that makes sense?
Yeah, 100%. And with our first venture, HelloFlow, back in 2021, we were kind of the forefront of this like no-code platform. And we really, like, in the span of these three last years, we realized how much this has been democratized. So there's like a plethora of different platforms out there that offering low code. So it's just a place you have to be now. Whether before we were basically, a bit ahead of our time, but today it's you need to have that. You need to have the flexibility not only to be able to support fully no code, but also to support just the logic, for example, just the logic of the flow, and present an API for your customers to basically control then the front end, because they want their branding, they want their own experience, they want to embed that properly with their already existing processes or websites. So it's definitely something that we needed. And where we're good at, again, is the orchestration part, right? So if they want to put Veriff at the very early beginning of the process, that's fine. Might be some use case where it makes more sense to put Veriff after, when they already collected some other information to do some checks, so that they can call Veriff only if this client is with it, for example.
Yeah.
So all these into consideration, yeah. The no-code approach is still pretty relevant.
Yeah, and I like that kind of idea of a very personalized approach to every customer is different in their own way, even if they're in the same industry, the same region, and so on. They all have sort of a unique use case, as it were. Although there may be some similarities between one payment company and another, I think possibly the way they're set up internally or the way that they approach different things is going to be different. So I really like that personalized approach. And do you find as well, I think it's probably worth talking about here, the kind of speed of implementation as well, when talking specifically about this no-code piece, and how quickly do you tend to find that customers of yours are able to just get up and running and get using things and sort of get, I suppose, that time to value piece as well that's in there, is that, how quickly they can start to see some real financial benefit from using the various services that you offer, not just through Veriff, I should say.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned timeline, because I was looking earlier into our Slack channel when we started talking to the Veriff team and how long it took for us to integrate. And I think it took around like shy of 3 weeks to integrate Veriff. So that was very fast, and we had a really good experience. But now when it comes to our clients, so what happens usually, we enter talks and we give them access to the platform, then they can build a process, or we build a process with them together, then they get to test it, and it's almost immediate, right? As soon as they have a process that looks like something they want to use and captures the information they want to capture, they can expose it directly to their end user, right? So it can take as little as a day, right? If they already have something in place to test it properly. Yeah. And if they rely only, I would say, on Veriff, for example, and not other services where they need to do proper testing and testing in different jurisdictions at different times of the day or these sort of things, if they just rely on Veriff, like, they're pretty ready to go, right? Pretty much ready to go immediately. So that's what the no-code approach is very beneficial for.
Yeah, I really like to hear that. As I say, it's and I think it's particularly applicable for smaller companies in the sort of scale-up phase, I would say, where they probably have smaller teams. Compared to a gigantic enterprise that probably has a big team that's dedicated to this, they can throw some more resources at it and so on. But for those scale-ups, it's a little bit different, and I think that they have less people, first of all, but they also want to get that sort of speed to value is much more important, because they want to make sure that things are working. So those people that are dedicated to that can then focus on the things that they should be focusing on, which is generating growth and more money for their customer, for their company, and so on. Right. I just want to pick up on another piece you mentioned there. It's come up a couple of times actually around this sort of multi-jurisdiction kind of problem that customers have. Just talk a little bit about Veriff there, if you wouldn't mind, because I think that's something that we're particularly proud of, this kind of document database that we have and so on. But it's really great to hear how it's used sort of in the wild, as it were, with your customers there. So is that something that you've had sort of decent feedback on, or that is a particular sort of selling point yourself, you find?
Yeah, 100%. That's definitely a selling point, because again, the payment providers or the payment service institution that we're servicing, that's what they are after, right? They're gonna have like a company or like a vendor that is an e-commerce, and these guys have payments coming from all over the place, right? So there's definitely this angle. There's another actually like a use case we've explored with Veriff. It's an interesting one for us, because it's kind of where we differentiate ourselves a little bit more. It's the onboarding of companies, right? So Veriff is very good when it comes to identifying like private people, persons and individuals. But when it comes to onboarding companies, there's a different approach to it, because the person that is going to onboard that company is not probably the owner, or it could not be the beneficial owner of that company, not necessarily, right? And it's a requirement to gather some information about these people, about the owners, about the people that have voting rights. It's necessary in a lot of jurisdictions to get personal information on these guys and to run some AML checks on those, right? So another use case we explored with Veriff is actually, how do we solve for this? Because the actual person sitting behind the laptop that is onboarding the company they're part of might not sit with the passports of the 3 UBOs or 5 different directors.
Yeah.
And they might not have the phone to be able to do a LavNet check right there, right? So they often have like a copy and another copy of the ID. And the use case we've explored with you guys is that how can we basically do the same sort of checks but with that copy, right? And like Veriff was pretty, like you guys were pretty good at helping us set up like a new integration on top of the liveness checks that we're already doing, so that we could service our companies' customers that wants to have these are like corporate onboarding, and have the possibility to upload these copies of documentation and get the same quality of verification, even though you don't have the liveness that gives you like this extra fraud check. But so that's also the flexibility we're talking about here, and in the fact that Veriff actually knows all these different types of identity documentations. So a driver's license from Jamaica or like a passport from Korea is something that Veriff is good at detecting anyway. And also for these owners that could be even more spread out than just like a company onboarding individuals in one jurisdiction, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a key part to it, and I think that's another really interesting point that you've sort of teased out in there. Actually, is the sort of responsiveness, I suppose, of the Veriff teams that we have here. I think we mentioned earlier on around the sort of the personalization of service for your customers and why that makes it easier. It's one of the things we're quite proud of too. Actually, is that being ultra responsive and really kind of listening to the problem that a customer or a partner is presenting, and then being able to adjust and adapt to it. So it'd be great to hear more about that, actually, because I think that's something that that other people listening to this would be in the same situation. Like, I don't want to buy something that's just an off-the-shelf solution. That some parts of it may work for me, other parts may not. But what is something that how does the team work to sort of adapt to your needs? I suppose is what I'm getting at here.
Yeah, well, to be honest, the whole process was super smooth. I mean, we knew you guys, so we had Luke was our point of contact because we knew him from our time at HelloFlow, our previous venture. So we started up by just saying, we just want to do the same again, and quite easily we set up like a Slack channel, and then a little meeting here and there to understand the needs. Seems pretty straightforward. Let's get cracking on the integration, and then we basically put one IT owner on our side was talking with one IT owner on your side, and then 3 weeks later we had our integration. And then when these extra clients that we were servicing came up with that second use case with the copy of passport for owners and UBOs, just use the same channel. The team was super responsive, and we had a second integration we could piggyback on in a matter of days. So that was pretty.
That's good to hear.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that. It's good to hear. I'll pass on your your thanks to the relevant teams, because there are an incredible amount of people who work very hard behind the scenes to make this stuff happen, and quite often they're the unsung heroes, I think. But are you able to sort of talk about some of the impacts of these things? I know it's a very early in your venture still, and maybe you don't have as much data as if you've been going for years and years, but is there any kind of anecdotal feedback around how well this stuff's performing or anything like that?
Not quite yet. As you said, we're still early, so most of the clients we have so far are testing out things, so they are not fully in production. Some are, but it's too early to say like what was the difference between before and after. But it's part of the strategy that they have in order to be compliant, essentially. So already they can say, okay, this is exactly what we need, because now the next time the regulator knocks on my door, I have exactly what I need in order to show them, right? So already like we see people, we see our clients that are very keen to click the button, add Veriff to their process, because that's the check that they need to have in place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know it's, as you did say, it's very early in the process still. But what would be, again, this is sort of a learning for people who are in the same kind of situation or in this situation at the moment. But what would be some of the kind of success metrics that you would point towards? Although it's still too early to have that data yet. Are there certain things that you kind of have consistently as being, right, these are the metrics we know we need to hit here, or anything like that?
Yeah, so we're talking about Veriff, we're talking onboarding, right? So
Yeah.
and the metrics for onboarding are quite quite known, right? It's like I want I want a low dropout rate, so high conversion, and I want high quality. And the guys that are going through, I want them to be verified and checked. So the metrics are going to be about low friction,
Yeah.
and that's going to be something that we explore with our clients. Where do you place the different questions? Where do you place the different steps? Where do you place checks like Veriff into your process to put like the least amount of friction in front of your end clients? And then the second metrics would be like, okay, how many of them are actually verified? How many are dropping out? How many are being like rejected because of fraudulent activity? So you would have all sort of dashboard to show, okay, do I get a lot of people in, and do I get a lot of people in that are high quality?
Yeah. Yeah, it's in some ways it's quite a simple equation, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
but I think it's interesting, always interesting to me actually where that line is, as you say, like the toleration of friction versus the toleration of risk, and so on. It's kind of a constantly moving line along a spectrum, and
Yeah, it's a tug of war a little bit for sure.
it is, isn't it? Yeah, yeah. Sometimes between internal teams as well, right? Within a company and everything else. We certainly see it across different industries that we work with. I mean, I know financial services is obviously much more heavily regulated, and there's much less tolerance of risk for obvious reasons. But when you start to move into things like marketplaces or maybe dating sites or social media platforms, like other businesses and other verticals there that do still have a need to verify who their customers are, but that isn't necessarily regulated or not regulated yet. So there's a real sort of that line is constantly shifting, and it's very, very interesting to me to see where it lands always.
Yeah, and that line is already being blurred more and more, like when it comes to crypto. So we have there's been everybody has been on Earth, so everybody's heard of crypto and how much different like brokers has been like seeing like popping up all over the place. So they've been like ingesting, like not ingesting, but like onboarding incredible amount of customers without really being regulated. But this is coming.
Yeah.
So now we like saying, oh, okay, what's going to be their strategy, right? Are they gonna, make a hard stop, hard break, and then move from one onboarding type of flow to another much more regulated and asking 10 times more questions with more checks and all that in place? Or is that going to be more transitional? Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I love to see sort of industries as they're developing, and it's growth at all costs. At the beginning, and then it sort of comes into something it's more regulated. It's more has to be sort of a more sustainable piece of the growth, and knowing who your customers are and building trust into those platforms is a big part of that for sure. Let's sort of time for one more question, but how do you sort of see your well? Let's just talk about spektr as a whole, I suppose. How do you see spektr developing over the next sort of 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, that kind of whatever horizons you kind of work to there, and how do you see your fitting into those some of those compliance market trends that you mentioned right at the beginning?
Yeah, so the vision always since we started the spektr is to be able to service as many use cases as possible, and like think high level, right? We're not really thinking of like, okay, we want to solve for that use case, but more like, okay, what are the basics of infrastructure that are needed in order for our clients to come and say, okay, I want to do this way. Is it possible? And that comes with like rethinking a little bit. What does that mean to be compliant, or to answer like or do a risk-based approach of an onboarding process, right? So that's where we're gonna thrive to and try to basically add on modules to our platform in order for our clients to just play Lego with it, essentially, right? I want a bit of this, I want a bit of that, and then so this is the general high level technical vision. But then there's also different parts of the industry, right? So there's compliance and risk, which is where we started. Then there's a lot of frauds where you want to, maybe do a little bit more. We like at spektr we're scratching the surface already, but verifying emails, verifying IP address, verifying all these sort of like parameters all together. Does that fit? Does that create like a profile of a customer that is fraudulent or not, right? That there's much more to do on this industry, and there's already a lot of players there. There's the transaction monitoring aspect, that also an whole industry by themselves, right? That spektr is not doing yet, but we might want to go into that space eventually in order to support the whole thing. And then case management, which is also something that is never going to completely go away, because as we said, that there's always this expertise of human knowledge that will always be necessary, even though we're going to throw a lot of AI and buzzword at it.
Yeah.
But this the case management is already like a huge aspect of how to make your process smoother, right? Not lose that much time on false positive, not lose that much time on like duplicate alerts, and getting a holistic view of your client's profile from a risk perspective. But also trying to have since you're gathering all this data, is there a way for you to actually activate some business levers, right? Because since you're gathering all that data, maybe you can identify also who are your potentially most high value customers. So that's stuff we explore, and there's a lot to do.
Yes, well, it sounds like some very exciting times ahead for spektr, and I'm sure the industry as a whole. And I know that I sort of speak on behalf of everybody here at Veriff. I'm saying we're very, very proud to be part of your journey as well, and we can sort of go on this together and see where we go. And in fact, actually, we'll probably have to get you back in a year's time or something like that, just to sort of tell us how things are going, because it will be really exciting to hear how all of this pans out.
I'd love to.
Sounds good. All right. Well, look, I think we've got to wrap up there, Jeremy. But this is really great. I mean, I really appreciate you taking the time to join us here, and this is a really good conversation. So thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, and thanks everybody for listening.
Thanks. Bye bye.